Welcome to this Pandemic Files. We're back again. This is amazing. You know, we're actually knocking them out of the park at the moment. So I'm Andy, joined again by Ian and Claudio. Thank you very much, guys, for joining us. And today we are going to talk about the puniest of humans. That's right, the Galactic Co-Prosperity Sphere, or GCPS for anyone who doesn't want to sound like a moron. So GCPS. So this is it, isn't it? This is like the base game. You know, this is humanity in its boring vanilla style, really, isn't it? You know, it's just us. No aliens, no fancy stuff, just literally us.
Puny, worthless humans.
I mean, honestly, who would ever want to play us in a science fiction game?
God, just get eaten, don't we?
Yeah.
Well, playing the underdog is always fun. That's why I like playing reps.
Well, you and the bloody reps started again. He's already started. We've had our 2 hours and 10 minutes of veering. Now we've got to listen to him. So, okay, yeah. I mean, they are Mr. Vanilla, aren't they? But tell us a bit about the GCPS, Claudio. Come on, let's get your fluff.
Yeah, I think only a few things, because the GCPS are, like you said, humanity, the humankind who went out for the stars and settled in a few movements around the galaxy and outer spheres and colonized many worlds. And the thing about the Co-Prosperity Sphere is that it is ruled by the Council of Seven. So the 7 biggest corporations are there, and they decide where humanity is going and how it's going. And it's all about money. It's all about corporations trying to get the license to mine on new planets or to conquer them. So it's about warfare, but also about wealth for a few of them. And I think one of the interesting points is that the GCPS are our point of view for the fluff always. So it's like looking from there to the forefathers of Syrians, etc., and maybe to go into a bit of Deadzone history. Interestingly enough, in version 1, there were no GCPS because the argument was they are too basic to be in a dead zone to fight there. Now we have them there, and we will see they are pretty basic, but they have their numbers, their special weapons, and their training, and they have ruthless leaders who will grind on their bones till they get the planet they want. So yeah, I think it's a really interesting faction because you have the normal guys competing against all sorts of aliens, and they have to compete just with manpower, discipline, and weaponry.
I think that's a good point you made there, Claudio, about the not being in the version 1, because they are us, and everything is sort of skewed through the humanity's vision, isn't it? So everybody else you meet is colored by their interactions with us, you know, in humanity. But now they are here, they are a bit less sort of varied, aren't they? Because they don't have freaky aliens and all this super stuff, but what they do have is a highly successful, highly wealthy sort of background to them, isn't it? They're sort of like the American army, aren't they? Sort of, you know, they've got loads and loads of kit, they've got plenty of bodies, that sort of stuff, aren't they? You know, they're if they need more, they just put more meat shields out. You know, that's fine. That's what they can do. So, I mean, has anybody, or the three of us, have you played with the GCPS?
Well, I think I've only played with them once because mostly I'm using my GCPS troopers as Mason Labs, but that's for another time. But I think I've played a few times against them, and it's always fun because you don't expect that much from them because they are just puny humans, right? But then all their special weaponry, and then you shoot 3 of them with your enforcers, and you don't have any bodies left, and they have like 8 more models to go to grab objectives to shoot you. And at some point, those hits will come through your armor and just overwhelm you. So I like to play against them because it's always fun, because you never know what will happen if you just get to corner them or if they will swarm and shoot you to bits.
What about you? And you've played them, haven't you, I think, a few times?
I've never run them. In fact, the only time I've really had a good look at the list is a little game I set up this last weekend to play in my house. A big humans versus orcs game using the Deadzone rules. So I was having a look through the list then. I wouldn't say I've even played against them that many times, if I'm honest. So I will plead ignorance to an extent here and say I'm not that knowledgeable.
Well, this is going to be a bloody good cast.
I'm going to wait with
The end.
Actually, I'll save you bacon. I've played them quite a few times, actually, and against them a few times as well. So I think they're very easy to underestimate. I think that's quite clear, actually. They don't do anything brilliantly because they're humans, so they're not specialists in anything, but they do everything okay. So they're not slow. They've got good weaponry. They don't shoot that well. They don't survive that well, but they've got quite a lot of numbers. So they can do a lot of different things. And also they've got a fair few different bits of kit as well. So they can bring a few more interesting things to the table, perhaps, than you might think with their heavy weapon options and stuff like that. Plus, of course, they've still got striders and stuff. And because they're relatively cheap, they can run a couple of striders in a 200-point list without any difficulty at all. So I don't underestimate them, I think, is one of the keys for sure. They're not one of the most popular factions for sure. I don't think you see them played that often. They came a bit later. They came with the Veermen, didn't they, in the infestation sort of stuff. And I think because of that, a lot of people had the other factions already. And I guess, you know, they are humans, so they're not as attractive, I guess, in a science fiction game. It's a bit like, you know, 40k or something like that. You know, people play Space Marines and they play Eldar and all sorts. People do play Imperial Guard, but they're not the most popular faction because they're us. You know, they're not as exciting in some ways. Okay, so it's interesting as well. You mentioned Maison Labs because, you know, what is Maison Labs? It's just one of these corporations, isn't it? You know, when we say Galactic Co-Prosperity Sphere, it's basically a whole bunch of industrial corporations that have their own militaries and their own fiefdoms and own planets and stuff like that, perhaps, where they're trying to sort of mine or sort of bioengineer a planet or something to make money from it. And to do that, they have to protect their assets, and that's why they have a military, effectively. So although we say it's the GCPS, there's no official, at least I don't believe there's an official army of the GCPS. What you're talking about is each corporation's troops, which I guess in theory could be armored differently, could look different, might even have more popular layouts for their armor and stuff like that, for their weaponry, sorry, than others. That's not really gone into in the fluff, but there's no overarching army organization, is there? You know?
I think that's an interesting point, because you could play the GCPS as a real standing army type, like Riker Corp is one of them, who are known for being a corporation just about warfare. So they are only like they are a private army, nothing else. But then again, you can have, like, here we have the Maison Labs, which are a bit special, but you can also play some other corporation, because mostly every corporation has some sort of an army type to defend their rights, to defend their properties, etc. So even if you have like some bioengineering or only normal engineering corporation, you surely have some military with them going on the planets. And usually you have your corporation from Acutech corporation weaponry, but you can do whatever you want. And I think there is a flair where you can really do an army or a strike team which fits your imagination and your style even. So that's what I really like. You can delve into all kinds of shady corporations doing their their thing in the Deadzone. Nothing official, nothing like the good guys. You can be like worse than the plague.
Well, this is Deadzone. There are no good guys. So, I think there's no good versus evil, because everyone is far more nuanced than that in what they want from life. I think as well, you mentioned different corporations, you mentioned a couple of them. There's really only about a dozen or so in various different books and things that have been named even. I mean, you can just make up whatever corporation you want, really. I mean, there's a few that are named in stuff, but not that many, to be honest. So plenty of scope for doing your own thing. So, okay, so we talked through some of the models. We spent a bit too long, I think, last time, so we might be a little bit briefer, perhaps, talking about these puny humans, because we enjoyed the rats, but these are humans.
2 hours spent talking rats was time well spent, no?
Absolutely, yeah. No one's upset about that. Well, only me was uploading it, I guess. So we'll spend a bit of time talking about the leaders. So we have 3 leader options for the GCPS, which is not as many as some factions, but it's about average, really. So they start with, well, in the way that they're in escalation, they start with a Ranger Sergeant. So 30 points, 3 victory points, shoots on a 4, fights on a 5, survives on a 4, 1/2 movement, 1 armor, 1 victory. Not 1 victory point, so 1 armor, size 1, sorry, big one. Tactician 1, aerial deployment. Stock comes with a pistol, range 3, and an energy gauntlet knockback for combat. Recon's on a 5 and has the Eye in the Sky special ability. So just read this one because it's quite good. When rolling a command dice, when rolling to hit a target with an indirect weapon or grenade during a shoot action, you may re-roll any number of dice. So that's quite sneaky, because normally you can't modify these dice rolls by throwing extra dice into it. So the ability to re-roll when normally you're going to shoot on a 5, because these are humans, nearly all of them shoot on 5s. That it doesn't guarantee you a hit, but it's pretty close to guaranteeing that you've hit the target cube. So it's a bit of a sneaky one, but of course you have to build your list to make the benefit of that splat. And as with all splats, it might not come up, in which case you've wasted your options, as it were, because you can't guarantee them. That's the biggest thing about splats. That's the biggest sort of controlling element for overpowered splats, I would say, is that no matter how good they are, if they don't come up, they don't come up. So what do you reckon on a Ranger Sergeant?
He's pretty tasty. I mean, let's look at his stats and say, oh, he's an enforcer.
Yes. Well, and we haven't got onto the others yet, but his stats are significantly better than most other.
He's one of very few to survive on a 4.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And he has a point of armor. Most don't have armor. Rangers have armor, but
he shoots on a 4, where we are like, puny humans only shoot on 5s. Yeah, well, he's just like the first profile we go through, and he just wrecks.
And the other good thing. Sorry, go on.
He's not typical. I mean, his stats are those of an enforcer.
And the other good thing about him is not only does he shoot on a 4, but he gets aerial deployment, which means you're quite possibly giving him height as well, because you can deploy him outside your deployment zone on the highest cube. So there's a chance he's getting a clear shot. There's a chance he's getting height. The only thing is you'll have to load out his weapon differently. So you have to pay a little extra points, because he doesn't really want a pistol if he's shooting from height. No. That's not the best
Thermal
choice.
rifle looks like a good choice from my eyes.
Yeah, thermal rifle, or another good one would be, I forgot the name, the Accutech with the holosight. Because it gives him another dice as well. But then you're talking about, he's talking about 48 points now, I think, or something like that. 38 points, sorry.
I think my personal favorite is just like the normal laser rifle.
Yeah.
Because he's like a tasty target already. Because he shoots really well, gives out that tactician, so you want him gone. And with aerial deployment, he often is some place where he can be shot. So if you give him like a 1 victory point and 8 or 10 point weapon, it really gets a too juicy target. So even with a pistol, he can work if you drop him not absolutely in the open, but like in the front line where he still can get that range 3 and hide behind a wall, or just get them for 2 points, a normal gun, and play him a bit safe, and then he's still good enough with a 4-up shoot to get the things done, and you don't overextend and kill him by having a thermal rifle. You just want to get there and shoot that juicy target, which maybe will survive and just kill you somehow.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, I think one of the most interesting things in the GCPS list is the aerial deployment. It's something that you don't see in a lot of other lists. And it's one of the tactics that can be used very effectively to really deploy a lot further forward, even than scouts or recon effects, to really end up right in front of your opponent. And you're taking first turn, which you'll know if you are or not, blow the crap out of somebody. But you're right, to do it with him is very risky.
Yeah.
The temptation is to use these abilities, isn't it? Scout and aerial deployment. And actually, as you say, you could end up making yourself far more vulnerable, particularly with a leader, than you probably should do. So, I mean, I have run the Ranger Sergeant several times, and I probably have used aerial deployment, but I've always only aerial deployed for height close to my own deployment zone. And I've given him a rifle or some such, something with a bit more range. Because if you put him too far forwards, then some Kalishi or something is slicing him up or something. And of course, whenever you're on height, anyone with an indirect weapon or a grenade themselves is going to be bouncing you down as well, which is not great because he doesn't have a jump pack. He has aerial deployment, and he may look like he has a jump pack, but he actually doesn't. So it still stings when he hits the ground.
it's more like a parachute coming down, which is used. But I personally like one item on him. If you can deploy him in the right way, where you just don't want to move, you have your rifle range 6. You are on top of a tower. You don't have to move anymore. You can get the comlink for 4 points, which gives you a special action where you can declare a cube, and everyone with an indirect weapon counts as seeing this cube. So hits only needs 1 hit to hit the target with an indirect weapon instead of 2 if the unit doesn't have a line of sight. And that pairs really, really well with the splat.
But you're doubling down on it, aren't you? That's what you're. Yeah, I think it possibly is a bit of a waste, but you can't guarantee the splat. So I guess by giving him a comlink, you're almost guaranteeing that the effect is the same whether you have a splat or not.
And that's the point. If you have a splat, you don't have to use the special ability and can maybe move a bit more, or maybe you have like 2 mortars and 2 grenade launchers because of the splat, and you won't have 4 splats to use in that round. So it helps to, if you really go down the indirect part, I think it can help to give you that effect, which always happens if you use
I normally run a mortar with my GCPS, so I have taken this guy fairly often because with a mortar it's so good, the GCPS mortar, that you really do want to make it count because it's still fairly pricey, and if it doesn't do something in the first couple of rounds, it's usually injured or taken out by the 3rd or 4th because it's so good. So yeah, he's a good option, definitely. So okay, we quite like the Ranger Sergeant. Next up is the inappropriately ranked Major General, promoted well above his level. What's a Major General doing in a dead zone? We've got sergeants and then a Major General. Major General, he's like a brigadier. It's equivalent to like a brigadier. I mean, he should have about 1,000 men underneath him. Jesus, what's he doing there?
Maybe he's the only one with the secret clearance. So only he knows what to do there or what to retrieve in the dead zone, and no one else should know it. So you only have your lowly sergeants and the really high up. So who knows?
I think maybe he started off with 1,000 meat sacks under him, but he's
not a very good general.
And now he's had no choice but to take to the field himself.
Operation
get the Hornet and get out of here.
Didn't work, but I've left these 15 guys. That's all we got left. Right, so the Major General. So he's actually quite similar in stats. So he shoots on a 4, fights on a 5, survives on a 5, 1-2 movement, armor 1, size 1, 30 points, 3 victory points again. So the same as a Ranger Sergeant. Pistol, R3, Officer's Sword, AP 1 in combat. Now he doesn't get anything fancy though, except he gets Tactician 2. So you're sort of losing points on some things, but you're gaining more tactician, which is worth it. Recon's on a 5 as well. Drone Strike is his splat. Spend an army special result on a command dice to allow the active model to take a special action to perform a range 8 indirect 2 attack, i.e. needing 2 successes to hit indirect. it's a special action here as well. So indirect would normally be a long action to fire indirect. So that's interesting. So what do you think on the Major General? Do you like him? Not a fan of the model, I'll be honest. Don't like the model much.
Yeah, it's one of the oldest GCPS models out there, I think. I think I like him. Tactician 2 is always nice. And 30 points for a Tactician 2 model, you can't do really anything wrong there. He's not a big fighter. He survives a bit worse than the Ranger Sergeant. He only has a pistol. That AP1 sword, I think you won't need any time. But I like the splat. A special action for an indirect attack. Usually, if you have many shooty guys, you will have one of them who won't have to move. So you can shoot and then shoot again with an indirect attack. And that indirect attack only uses 2 dice to wound, so it won't do much damage. But throwing them away from any cubes with victory point mission targets, or throwing them off of height of towers into walls, pinning them, I think it's really, really good.
Is it worth clarifying at this point just what exactly indirect 2 means?
Yeah, I got it wrong.
Yeah.
Well, that is what it says in the book, but it's not quite as clear as it could be, is it?
Go on then, Ian.
Well, I'm looking at the FAQ. It doesn't say.
So you make an indirect attack, don't you? But you only roll 2 dice, isn't it?
It should be frag 2. Indirect frag 2. Is that what it should be?
Yeah.
Well, effectively, it doesn't quite work like that, does it?
It's you shoot a normal indirect attack. So you have 3 dice. You shoot on your shoot stat, and if you see the target cube, you have to roll 1 success, so 1 5-up normally with your dudes. Or if you don't see it, you need 2 5s, but it's always a 3 dice test. And then after you hit the cube or miss, and maybe you go to an adjacent cube where you hit other targets, then you roll for damage. And that damage is only dealt with 2 dice.
Yeah.
While a grenade launcher uses 3 dice to damage, or a mortar uses 4.
So yeah, sorry, go on.
Yeah, you hit the same with like every indirect weapon. It's only about doing the damage, which is different. So this is low damage but high utility weapon.
So I think that's what it does. I've used this guy quite often because I always like the Tactician 2 on the cheaper armies. Like Rebs, I always run the Rebs leader as well for the same reason. So that Tactician point is good. It gives you another chance of getting your splat. And sometimes I've had 2 of these splats come out at the same time, and it's been brilliant because you just pin everybody, because you've got a mortar as well, and you get 2 drone strikes, and everybody's messed up in that whole battle plan for that round then by your opponent, even if you haven't damaged them, because as you say, chances of actually injuring them isn't that high. But if you land onto some Veermin or you land onto some Kalishi or something like that, actually you've got a reasonable chance of doing a wound, bounce them into a wall or something like that. No, it can be really, really good. But of course, like all splats, you can't rely on it. He's absolute garbage in fighting, really. Like you say, I mean, it's not a garbage stat, but he's just too puny. So anything that wants to fight is going to take him out. I don't even really shoot him. I usually just tuck him around and hide him because he's too expensive in his command dice to risk losing. I don't upgrade his weapon. I leave him on the pistol and I just sort of hide him around, and he comes out when you're under the cosh a bit just to try and take a model out or something like that.
He can still get a pot shot on some closing in
or use his drone himself.
Yeah,
he can use the drone. If you get
he's
splat.
got more weapon options though than the Ranger Sergeant, so I'd be tempted to give him a sniper rifle or something.
Yeah, that'd be tempting. But then whenever you put a sniper rifle on your Tactician 2, the worry is you're going to use him, aren't you? And then if you use him, if he's not back in cover, which he's unlikely to be, because their sniper rifle is heavy, I think.
Yeah.
Which means you're not moving out and back in to cover in the same round. It's not like you can do that on the Reb leader. Do that on the Reb leader on the 3+ shoot of the. We're getting onto Rebs here, Claudio. Look, because that's a light weapon, so you can walk out, shoot, and if you've got a move dice, pop yourself back in. It's that's a perfectly legit technique, but not on any other leaders really.
How about a grenade launcher?
No, the grenade launcher would be great. If you could have a grenade launcher, that would be a great option. Yeah, because shooting on 4s, you don't have to see really, because you're probably still getting that target.
Very good chance of getting it in. Yeah.
Yeah, so we like the Major General. That's good. Yeah. Just wrong rank.
And I think he works again very good with the mortar and the grenade launcher army, which the GCPS can field. And again, the item comlink on some other guy, not on him, can help getting those drone strikes there where you want them. So, yeah.
So the last leader, the Corporation Marine Sergeant. Now we didn't even bother calling them Corporation on the other ones, but this one gets the full title: Corporation Marine Sergeant. 22 points, 2 victory points, shoots on a 5, fights on a 5, survives on a 4. We just keep messing around with all these stats. They're up and down like a fiddler's elbow. Moves 1, 2, armor 1. So all the leaders got armor 1, size 1. Base comes as pistol, range 3, and an energy gauntlet, and is tactician 1. And has a recon of 6+, so that's not very good. And then has the longest splat description in the entirety of Deadzone. I'm not going to go through it all. Overwatch. Basically, if someone moves into a cube with one of your unactivated models, you can do a little pot shot at them. So pretty
That's
situational.
Cool.
It is cool. It's very thematic.
Only with a rapid fire weapon, so you have to build around it a bit.
Can't you do it with a mortar? You should do it with a mortar.
Not even
mortar
with a sniper,
in their face.
Yeah, but when you've got an army full of puny humans, many of which who might just have rifles.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, and they're meat bags ready to get eaten by some big gribbly. Then being able to pump it full of lead first gives you a fighting chance at least. Certainly better than actually fighting.
Sure. And for
and if you do a wound or something,
and the normal Marine, we will see, has only a 6-up fight stat, so you don't want to fight. And having many of them as a swarm with a 22-point leader is awesome.
And it's a shoot action, this splat, not a fire for effect. So you can't stop them getting in, except by killing them. You're unlikely probably to kill them, as we said, because you're shooting on fires, and you can't modify it with quite a few of the normal modifiers. But if you've got a holocyte in your weapon or something like that, you still can use that. So what do we think? Yeah, he or she's cheap for sure. Tactician 1. I'm going to be honest, I find the splat too difficult to work. You can't plan for it. It's situational. People have to come at you, and you have to have the splat there at the time. It does work. It's perfectly fine. I've used it, but I don't like a splat where you are waiting for someone else to do something. I find that
save it, haven't you? You might end up just not using it, so you'll always be tempted to re-roll it, I think. Yeah,
exactly. That's what I would do. And it's annoying because normally, not every splat you get is brilliant, but they're generally a positive thing. You know, they're usually quite relatively strong. It varies obviously quite widely, but they're relatively strong because they allow you to do something you wouldn't normally do.
Yeah, I think another problem is if you are facing off against an enemy who is like only shooting, you won't need that ever because they aren't charging. But then you know it, and then you can reroll them without any doubt. Yeah. I think it's a really cheap option, and you don't have to build your army around it, which can be something good. You're very flexible. You can take whatever you want because your basic troops all have rapid fire weapons, so you can always use it. The sergeant, him or herself, doesn't have a rapid fire weapon, only a gauntlet and pistol. Yeah, but that's a bit sad.
It's the only way you can tell that someone's an officer or an NCO, isn't it? If you give them a pistol. That's classic sort of miniature gaming, isn't it?
Yeah, it's crazy. That's the only thing I really don't like. Otherwise, 22 points, a splat, which can be really good. But also, you can re-roll it if you don't need it. So, and you don't have to be sad if you don't get that splat where you have built your whole army around the splat and you never get it. So I think that can be a positive to have it like a nice extra, but don't need it to get your tactic going.
I agree. I think he's the one to go for if you don't want to spaff 30 points on your leader, because he's just in the puny meat bag.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly what I've done with him. I've only taken this one when I want to absolutely load out on the 15 Marines or something like that.
And he doesn't shoot that good, so you don't feel bad if you hide him. But he still survives on a 4 with 1 armor, so you can just get it somewhere in some edge, and he doesn't usually die that easily. That's good.
He's the best choice for keeping your 4 tack dice all game.
Yeah, because it's too bad to use.
So
Okay.
let's start talking about some of the troop options then. So there's not masses of troop options, but they're pretty cheap and they're pretty generic. So the worst of the option, we'll do this one quite quickly, I think, Corporation Recruit. Okay, so these are the just out of trade, base camp sort of thing. 6 points, 1 victory point, shoots on a 6, fights on a 7, survives on a 5, comes with a laser rifle, range 6 rapid fire, 1/2 moves, no armor, size 1. These are the old style PVC models, aren't they? Before the hard plastic ones.
Well, that's the picture in the book. You could build it with.
Oh yeah. You could use whatever you want. So, what do we think of these guys?
Cannon fodder, getting more rifles on the board just because you might get lucky.
It's crazy because 8s still hit, and you still have 3 or 4 dice if you're higher up with them. And for 6 points, I've seen them in use, and they are awesome. They don't look like that.
Awesome?
But yeah.
Might be overselling it.
Wrong.
Yeah, but I
might on occasion have done
one.
reasonably okay.
Yeah, but if you have like 4 or 5, 1 will go through, and I think one of the best things, which is if you're a red player, you will know that the 5-up survive on those throwaway troops is so good. It's so good for
compared to a Rev Trooper, yeah.
Yeah, and also compared to a Mason Lab Security or a zombie, etc. So they survive as good as like any other model, except like Rangers in the army list, and that's really good. Just like throw them away, and they won't die that easily.
Well, they will.
Yeah.
But I mean, I guess they're there, aren't they? They're cheap, aren't they? I only run 2 or 3 of them normally at most, because I use them to grab the objectives. The guys where I'm not that bothered on him trying to get a shot this turn. So him taking a 2 cube move to grab an objective is far better use than someone who can shoot a bit better, wasting to do the same. I'm not particularly bothered if they die either, because yes, I'm giving up a victory point, but I'm not giving up something I'm really expecting to use in a different way. So yeah, they're a bit throwaway, as you say, aren't they? I guess the problem for them is that at 6 points they're a steal, but even more of a steal at just 8 points is the standard Marine, actually, because he's very similar, same weaponry, but he shoots on a 5, fights on a 6, and survives on a 5. So basically he's the same as a recruit, but shoots better and fights better for 2 more points. So, I pretty much load out on the Marines if I'm going to load out on anything, rather than those couple of points you save to get a recruit don't really seem in my maths when I'm designing a list to have been worth just 2 points, unless you're really desperate for a point here or there. What do you reckon, guys? You like Marine?
Yeah, I think with that extra shoot stat, I mean it's either or. I think they're quite well balanced, those two, between the two, because you either choose to spend your points on slightly fewer better men or just more of the really cheap stuff. I think there's merit to both.
Personally, I like the Marines. Again, they are 1 point more than the Rep Trooper with a better survive, so they are really good. I know I'm sneaking it in there.
Every time you mention it.
But personally,
every time you mention it, you're just pushing it back another pandemic.
But personally, I like the recruits or the veterans, which are the third troop choice. And
good segue. Let's talk about the veterans then.
Because I think the veterans have a shoot of 5, like the Marine, but a fight on 5, survive on 5s, but have weight of fire on their rapid fire laser carbine. So they can reroll one dice when shooting. And I think for 3 points more, so 11 points, they are really good because that reroll is awesome. And
I think that even the fight as well, it just gives them that little bit more versatility, doesn't it? Is that you're not instantly, oh well, I'll definitely survive. You actually think, oh, actually, maybe I'll have a go at this not great model that's attacked me. I mean, you're not going to fight a Kalishi perhaps, but you'll have a crack at a Vehement Stalker.
But you can always fight because you don't have a downside to it, and that's awesome. To have the chance,
you might injure him.
If you're lucky and you want to roll successes, if you survive or fight, but if you even have a chance, it always helps. And if you have like some plague dogs or something, the opponent might hesitate to attack them because he knows that they might die.
It's that thing in Deadzone, isn't it? If your stats are the same and you're being attacked, there's never a downside to fighting. You only ever, if you're the person being attacked, the only point to survive is if your survive stats better. That's the only reason, isn't it? Because there's no other downside at all. Whereas because you can't, if you get a really great roll on survive, well, you've survived really well, but you haven't injured them, whereas you could have actually done some damage or killed them. I also go very heavily on the veterans. I usually take them in a 50-50 ratio, actually, Marines and veterans, if I can, or at least maybe 60% of Marines and 40% veterans, that sort of ratio, because you've got lots of bodies, so getting them up for a height isn't that difficult sometimes. That way to fire is incredibly useful, and they're the models that if you've got a shoot dice or you've got an extra dice on your command dice, they're the ones that you spend them on rather than the Marines, because the more dice you roll, when you've got weight of fire as well, the more chance you are of getting that 8 train and that sort of stuff, isn't it? So yeah, they're a really good choice. And considering you've only got those 3 troop choices, there's a fair spread, actually. I mean, they all sort of do the same thing, but they all do it differently, which is pretty good, actually. And if you look at, you talked about not being much difference in price, but Corporation Veteran versus a recruit, he's nearly double the price, actually.
But I think that's why my approach is more like go recruits and or veterans and leave out the Marines, because the biggest problem I see when I'm playing against GCPS and someone has like 4 veterans and 4 Marines, let's say, I'm always shooting the veterans and they survive the same as the Marines. True. So if you take recruits and veterans, you have more bodies, and then you shoot the veterans either way. So because they are just too good. Then
those recruits aren't doing as much. So think if you're running
have the Marines left over.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
True.
So think if you're running the Major General when you've got your drone strike. Well, suddenly your drone strikes are doing nothing because you're firing them off with your less good recruits rather than with a Marine.
Sure, I think that's preference.
That's why you play reps, isn't it?
Yeah, that's true. And then veterans work really well with Sergeant, because if you get that Overwatch shot, as you mentioned, you probably won't kill someone because you don't get the modifiers for a clear shot or hide, but you get your weight of fire. So if someone charges you and you have your rapid fire, weight of fire 1 laser carbine, you can actually kill someone before he charges you. Or at least you have a better chance of wounding them and then fight on a 5. So that's what I really like about veterans and the cheaper Sergeant.
Moving on.
Yeah, specialists. So we've got a few different types of specialists, haven't we? They all do quite different things. So we'll go through them as they are in escalation. So Corporation Medibot. I can feel your enthusiasm leaving right now.
You've skipped to the next page, mate.
Have I?
Yeah. Let's start with Marine Specialist, shall we?
No.
I think you have the print.
You have the old version.
Yeah. I think with the Monocycle, which got into escalation PDF, the Medibot is the first one.
So well, let's do it Let's do it how it is on mine, because otherwise I get confused.
Yeah, I have the PDF open too, so
yeah, exactly.
2 against 1.
Corporation Medibot, 18 points, 1 victory point. This is a model from Dreadball, actually. It's been repurposed. One of the really nice models from Dreadball. Moves on a 1/2, size 1, no armor, can't fight, can't shoot, survives on a 5, construct, medic, and a defender shield. What do you reckon, guys?
How many points is it in your book?
18 in mine.
Still 18. Wow.
Yeah, I think that's the profile is awesome, but 18 points is really steep. Only by 1 victory point is fair, but still. I think Defender Shield and Medic, which gives Resilient 1 for the whole cube. So you get 1 armor and Resilient 1 for the whole cube. Get 3 other models in there, like your veterans. And it's
got
awesome.
no indirect.
Yeah. But I think it's still good. I like it. And you can give the Corporation Medibot that comlink, which I mentioned. As a special action, it can heal as a medic, and with another special action, it can spot an enemy cube for shooting. If you get it like in a cube where it can be shot anywhere. So
I'm not sure that's a great policy, because you want height on that comlink. You want on a ranger.
You're obsessed with comlinks.
He is, isn't he?
I think but it works. It's an interesting item for that army. It's just an idea, because you usually it's not that good a target because it doesn't hurt anyone. So
it's not going to be the one that you aim for first.
Yeah,
you're going to shoot the other guy.
You're just standing around if you don't have to move to heal someone. So it's just an idea, nothing more.
I mean, I
think it's too expensive anyway.
Yeah, it might be a bit too expensive. I like the Medibot because it's like a medic, but better, isn't it? I mean, the medic is basically a standard human, standard marine, but 11 points, and all he brings is a pistol and a medic. Whereas the Medibot, he can't shoot, but he also gets the defender shield and isn't pinnable. So he's got some advantages, but you are paying 7 extra points for that, of course. Obviously, as well, with the defender shield, you're going to want to put him in a cube with something, whether it's a full cube or whatever. You're going to want to gain that defender shield by the robot putting itself in the way. So what are you going to put him with? You're going to put him with your mortar, you might do, or something like that. But actually, can't put him with mortar; it's too big.
Yeah, the problem is the Medibot doesn't give the defender shield. Only works with size 1 and 2. So if you want to heal your weapon team, which is a really good idea, by the way, we will get to that, I think. The normal medic is better, but if you want to shield your snipers or other specialists, which are only size 1, I think the Medibot is a better choice. If you're not facing against Forge Fathers who just ignore your 1 armor. And
well, that's it, isn't it? I mean, the armor is only beneficial to an extent. I guess on your leaders, it's better because they already have a point of armor. So they're now coming out armor 2, and they're looking, some of them are surviving on 4s. So suddenly they're looking pretty tasty, but you've spent a lot to protect that, haven't you?
For a guy you're hiding at the back, you're then adding another 18 points to his cost to keep him alive.
Right, I guess if he's shelling out 2 tactician dice on that, he might be worth that. But it's another cost, like you say, for that Medibot that can't do anything else. He can't take the occasional shot either, can he?
Yeah,
and also you're probably not grabbing objectives either because you're wanting to use that defender shield all the time to protect the guy you're then going to run away from.
Yeah.
Right. So next up will be the heavy weapons squad. So we've mentioned these. These are 12 points, 1 victory point, move 1/2, no armor, size 3. Actually, so you can get in there, can't you? Size 3.
You can get in there, but the defender shield only works with size 1 and size 2.
Yeah.
So that's why I would put a normal medic in there and not the Medibot.
Shoots on a 5, fights on a 6, survives on a 5. There's this weird thing that comes stock with laser rifle, but that's sort of pointless because you have to buy our weapon, of which there are 4 crew weapon options. One is the mortar.
Do you have to buy one?
You do, yeah. It says so in the weapons team description, yeah. So you have to. So it's a bit of a weird thing that's even in there. So you've got the options of a mortar, which is indirect 4, autocannon, which is your pinning weapon, laser cannon, which is your high AP one, and missile launcher, which is your, I forget now, frag
3 AP1. So
yeah,
it's basically automatic hits with AP1. Ooh,
yeah.
That's
So,
tasty.
so what do we think of this? I mean, it works out being expensive because you end up with a 20 odd point weapon, only 24 sort of points, depending on which weapon you've taken for it. But
I think there's pluses and minuses here. I mean, the autocannon is only 4 points to add, so it's a 16-point model. Well, that's the same as you'd pay for, say, a Marauder with an HMG, which suppression, weight of fire 1. The difference is that the GCPS squad is a heavy weapon, so they're not going to be moving and firing. But the plus side is they're size 3, so they've got twice as many wounds.
They don't survive quite as well as the Marauder, so there's a bit of a balance.
And they have another downside. Once they are wounded, they get the reload ability.
So that's an interesting one. So how does reload's a funny one, isn't it? In that once you're wounded, you put a reload token down, okay, and then it's a, I think I have to look it up now. It's a
after you shoot,
after your next shot, isn't it?
Yeah. So you get wounded, and if you shoot wounded, after that you put down your reload token, and then you need an action to get
so that's away. The weird thing. So if you get wounded in round 4, it actually has no effect whatsoever in the game. Yeah. Because you're still shooting in round 5, and then the game's over because only 5 rounds. So you can sometimes find that having a reload token isn't such an issue, actually, particularly on something like a mortar, where it's got a minimum range as well. So by the time you get to that stage of the game, you might actually not really have any targets because, say, if you're playing Veermin, they're all too close now anyway. So it's an interesting one, isn't it? The way it works with removing the reload. But you're absolutely right. Having a medic nearby to take that off is very valuable because it keeps you theoretically in the game. The other thing about reloads is that even if you're wounded in round 1, it's only actually affecting 2 shots in the game. So even if it's a 5-round turn, because you're shooting round 1, you're shooting round 2, you're not having it on round 3, shooting round 4, you're not having it on round 5. So it isn't quite as debilitating as it might first seem. But obviously, if those are the rounds you do want to shoot, then that's a pain in the butt.
Yeah, and I think that's that's a bit of a problem, because usually my experience is that the one wound from like a random stalker or recruit or whatever, like those low point models just shooting at the heavy weapon squad to get that one wound, you don't have to kill or like make the 4 wounds. Either way, you die instantly, or you have that one there to get the reload. It hurts, and that's why I think a medic is a really good choice if you're playing the more aggressive weapons, say no mortars. Yeah, and I think that's why mortars are so good or so often taken, because either way, indirect 4 is just good. You can pin, which helps the GCPS to slow down the movement, and you don't have to get out there, because a 5-up survive usually get shot by anything and you get a wound.
Yeah, so the mortar can just sit at the back, can't he, and just probably be safe, because he's probably hitting the target cube, needing 2 hits of 3 dice on 5s. And if he's not, then, I'm assuming you can't see him. If he's not, then you might still be hitting something useful nearby, depending on who you're fighting. I mean, I tend to run 2 heavy weapon squads, actually. If I'm going full infantry, I'll run 2 heavy weapon squads, one with a mortar and one with the autocannon. Because I think the almost guaranteed pinning of an autocannon is guaranteed pinning really, is really useful for dealing with the models that you struggle to deal with, i.e. Teratons and stuff like that. And I've lost games before because I got overexcited and tried to shoot, and stopped with my policy of just keeping a Teraton pinned back, So I did that for a round, and then the Teraton stood up and obviously teleports in, and that's it. By that time, he's too close. If I'd have just carried on with a policy of him just standing up, walking one cube, then he'd have spent the whole game doing that, and that would have been fine. I'd have defeated everything else.
Mm.
I think the double mortar is a tempting one as well, for sure. That's all your eggs in one basket. I think the laser cannon struggles a bit because, yes, AP is good, but your shoot stat's not brilliant. And so therefore, people's survives is at least as good as your shoot stat, and possibly even better. So you're just not throwing enough dice at it, I think. The frag one's also tempting. Missile launcher's tempting because frag's always good.
I think the laser cannon has a problem that you won't, if you shoot at a Strider, you won't get the 5 health points away. So
it'd be better if it had firing platform, actually, wouldn't it, or something like that?
Yeah. So
one of those ones that gives an extra die, because you're probably not getting height that easily because you can't move and shoot and all that sort of stuff.
So I think you should mostly ignore the high armor things if possible, because you don't really have a mobile weapon for that, other than a Strider, which could be a really good option there. But yeah, and I think the rocket launcher, as Ian already mentioned, as a frag weapon, it always wounds on 4. So you just roll the frag, which always is on a 4-up. So you have 3 dice on 4-ups with AP1, which is really good, which is like an even dice roll against Enforcers, say, or even better against Asterians, which have armor 1. The Ciphers, 5-up survives, 1 health. It's awesome, but risky and expensive because you have to get out there in line of sight.
Well, it's expensive, and so it should be, because it's very good. Because of all of those weapons, it's the one that's completely ignoring the fact you've only got a shoot stat 5+. You're just skipping straight to 4+. And it's going to affect everything in a cube as well. So it's like, ooh, if your opponent is careless, that could devastate. Range 8, so it's going to get anything it can see. Pretty tasty.
Yeah, it's a good choice, I think. But I guess for me, the mortar does the same more safely, and then it comes down to I can get pinning still much cheaper with the autocannon. So it comes down to that sort of maths of what can I do when I run mine. So that's why I tend to take those two. But it's always there in the mix. It's always one you go, ooh, should I? But it never quite makes the cut for me.
Well, I mean, the mortar's damaging on 4+, just the same, but with 4 dice.
Yeah. But the thing with the mortar is that because you can hide it. So when I run a mortar and a GCPS, I'm absolutely looking for somewhere to hide it. Just literally tuck it behind a building. It's like so no one can see it, or as few people as possible can see it for as long as possible. So I get 2-3 rounds of firing my mortar. Now, that doesn't quite work if they've also got a mortar, of course. But
you give away 2 victory points extra for the mortar, whereas the missile launcher is only 1 victory point extra. But usually you don't lose. Yeah, that's big, the point.
They're often wounded, but they don't always. They often survive a game.
And then again, you don't need line of sight with the mortar if you have a comlink equipped with someone.
Obsessed. Honestly, obsessed.
Okay, I'm stopping now.
Right. So good choices for the heavy weapon scenes. Next up, Marine Motorcycle. So this is a new one that came out in Escalation. It used to be you could buy them on a bike, and then they brought out these amazing resin models. So they created a profile for him. He's basically an infantryman on a bike. So the Marine Monocycle. So this new resin model that came out in Escalation. So he's just a basic Marine, isn't he? He's exactly the same as our normal Corporation Marine. The only difference is that he's 9 points and 1 victory point. He moves on a 1-5 rather than a 1-2, and he's a vehicle. So vehicle means he can be pinned but can't be moved by frag or stuff like that. it also means he can't go up any structure unless there's a ramp, because he's a bloody bike. That's why. You can do the wheel. Is it the spinning thingy of death? What's the thing you used to have at the circus?
Wall of death. Yeah.
Wall of death. There you go. That's what he needs, isn't it? A wall of death. I knew you'd know that. You're a petrol head, aren't you? So yeah, a marine monocycle. What do you reckon about this guy? He's basically a normal marine, but goes faster, and for 1 extra point.
First of all, awesome model. So
amazing.
That alone is like, take it because it's good. The one downside is it's a specialist, but then again, you usually have enough bodies, so it's no problem. 1 point extra. It's not a really big cost. You don't get that height usually, so okay. But then again, you have the movement to get it early, round 1, to an objective, to a cube where you can't possibly get or don't want to get there with your troops. So it's a good distraction. Once it's in place, it can get good clear shots. You can also use a shoot die, go up to 5 cubes, and then clear shot something. It has its uses. It's a bit limited, but I think it gives a bit mobility. And for 9 points and 1 victory point, you don't lose anything really.
Yeah, I think that's the thing, isn't it? It's the fact. Yes, it does take a specialist slot up, but you've usually got loads of them. But the only 1 point extra means that you can have a crack at this without any real worry. You're not wasting anything, are you? To throw this guy, because he's a normal marine. I mean, and most of the marines are not going to be climbing over buildings. Some will be on the floor. I think the clear shot angle you said is a really interesting one, because if you do that at the end of a round, you might also get another clear shot next round, depending on who you're playing and how many models they've got and all that sort of stuff. Probably not, because you're GCPS, so you're perhaps not doing that. But I think he's the sort of one, I've never actually used him because he was a later model. He's the sort of one I think I'd be saving till the end of the round and then zooming him out to grab that 2 point objective. Particularly on some of the missions now have got 2 and even 3 point objectives. The other one he'd be really great on is oh god, I forget the name. The one with the 4 point objective right at the back.
Invade. Yeah.
Invade. Yeah. Where you sort of like tuck him up the side on round 1, and then round 2, even if he doesn't go there, he's threatening to go there, and therefore they've got to leave somebody in that cube or around there to deal with it. And because you're probably going last in the round as well, because you've got quite a lot of models, actually you basically have to sit someone in the cube, otherwise you're going to score 4 points. So yeah, I think he's got quite a lot of versatility in that, I think. And in model is absolutely cracking. It's a really good one. I'm tempted to shave off the wheel of one a little bit, so he's a bit of an angle. I know he would have his knee coming out to sort of come around the corner a bit, but I think he'd look really nice like that. Or on a ramp, going up, about to catch some air or something like that, as he's zooming over the top of a fallen Z or something like that.
How much bigger would you make the base height-wise then to
Oh, massive. So we can shoot better. He's more chance of getting that clear shot then.
No, it's modelling for advantage, mate. Okay.
Yeah, I know. It's a perfectly legit technique.
Doing a loop
ourselves
in the air with some 6 inches high, doing a loop, and yeah.
Well, the other alternative, you can have the bike. You could model it so the bike's going off out of left field and the man's going off out of right field, because he's just completely gone flying.
Oh.
So yeah, we like the monocycle. I don't think you're ever going to run more than 1 or 2 of them, are you? Because what you're gaining for that point in the speed, you're sacrificing in the versatility to be able to get the height and stuff like that, aren't you?
And if you want to shoot, you usually only move the same as a normal marine, which is really bad. And if you use the shoot die to get that clear shot, you could use the shoot die for an extra mortar shot.
Yes.
Or sniper. And you have so many bodies where you can use your command dice on.
Yeah, so, I think I like the idea of clear shots, but I think more likely I'd be grabbing objectives with him, or threatening to attack someone who is weak. Like a I don't know, a 3A leader or something like that. Yeah, of course. course, we talked about Veerman last time. Pick on the week. You know, someone who is vulnerable that that they'll want to protect or something like that. An overseer or someone, you know, who really doesn't want to get into a fight if you can help it.
I think it's something special and something new for the GCPS. Who you stated at the beginning of GCPS aren't slow. No, but they aren't fast at all. But the monobike is the only thing which moves more than 2 cubes. And you can use that to your advantage because GCPS lack the board control. You always have to stay back a bit because you don't want to get into fights. So even if you can't fight, you have something where you can get so fast that you are there maybe a round earlier than anything else. So for me, it's a tactical option. It's not something which really kill, but it can be good with the clear shots.
So next up is probably the most important specialist option out there, I think. And you tend to see people run at least 1 or 2 of these, sometimes quite a lot of these. So this is the Ranger. So the Ranger, 16 points, 2 victory points, and a specialist, of course. Moves on a 1-2, armor 1. So the only model that isn't a leader, I think, with armor. Size 1, of course. Shoots on a 5, fights on a 5, survives on a 5. Laser rifle, just standard laser rifle, but has aerial deployment and has some weapon options as well. So what do you think of the Ranger? Oh, and you can put a common link on him, of course, Claudio. I'll just get that in there early for you.
Yeah, because he can aerial deploy somewhere up there. So
shut up. You're not coming back on next time.
So you're doing reps next time without me, right?
Oh yeah, let's do that, Ian. Let's do that. Reps without Claudio. That'd be amazing. It'd just be like, it'd be 5 minutes long, wouldn't it? It'd be like
real short video.
Rebs, you just want to take the leader and every single sniper. That's it.
Anyway, let's not get carried away.
Ranger. So yeah, do we like the Ranger?
Yes. Yeah, it's really good. He's expensive though. Ooh. Ooh. I mean, when you've got all these cheap guys in your troop section, suddenly 16 points and 2 VPs, it's like you can equip it and make him do something really cool because of that aerial deployment. But you've really got to get your money's worth out of him first turn, because otherwise he's gonna die. Yeah.
You're hoping really when you take a couple of Rangers and put them at height to get an extra activation, aren't you? Because you probably aren't winning. Well, you might win recon, but they haven't got the best recons. The GCPS
5, 6.
Yeah, exactly. So
you'll know whether you've won the recon or not.
Well, true. Yeah, and that will determine where you deploy them. Yeah, but either way, you still want to get either a shoot dice or an extra activation minimum, don't you? To make, as you say, to make the most of your 1 or 2 Rangers. And most people probably run 1 or 2, don't they?
Which makes them more expensive.
If you're not clear shotting the opponent's leader, then you've wasted him.
Yeah, or either the leader or some other special weapon or something like that. The threat, isn't it?
Yeah,
really good.
I think one big point is they have plenty of weapon options, which make them even more expensive. And as we said, with aerial deployment, you usually get on the high ground, which exposes you too. And then if you go stock, you are worse than an 11-point veteran.
Well,
regarding the
armor.
Output. Yeah, regarding the output. You've got armor and you've got height, but you won't have that rate of fire with your stock weapon.
Yeah, but I guess that's the thing, isn't it? If you with the aerial deployment, you should be getting an extra dice every time. You don't have to, but generally you're going to put them on height.
But that's something you have to think about. So for 5 points more and 1 victory point more, you get a model which stat-wise isn't more offensive than some other choices, but very versatile, and it's good, else you wouldn't take it. But I've seen people taking 3 of them, and half of the army is like dying in the first round because you overextend. You can take flamethrowers, which is awesome with aerial deployment.
Then the range is short.
Yeah, the range is short, but you can deploy where you can shoot them first round and shoot on 2 cubes with the shoot die.
Well, you've got to be 2 cubes away from your opponent. So, and then if you want the height,
Yeah,
then
but
your
well,
range 2 flamer is
sure,
starting to be at the, meaning you're having to move to then do something.
But you won't need the height with the flamer because you don't get the extra height. So you can do some shenanigans, but then you know he will die.
Yeah.
So I think the Rangers are one of the most complicated maybe to play, because you have to be really aware that even with the armor of 1, they only survive on 5s and are so exposed and give away 2 victory points and cost so much.
It knocked off that building very easily as well, and then you fall to the ground again. I mean, I must say, I typically run 2. I don't tend to run more because you run out of places to put them, actually.
Yeah.
You know, if you're wanting to shoot with them, then you actually don't want them more than halfway up the table because you're too close to the enemy. Then, you know, I tend to take them stock with a laser rifle, or with the they can have the Acutech Holocyte one. So that works out pricey, but I'll do that for that one first shot with height, with a Holocyte, maybe with an extra shoot dice or something, to try and eliminate that target you want.
I was thinking the laser carbine looked better because 1 reroll, I mean, that's practically as good as 1 extra dice, isn't it?
Yeah, it is really.
On a 5-up, yeah.
Yeah. So I think, they're really good. I think if you take more than a couple, then you're starting to cramp what they can do, and they are very expensive. I think most games they've both died, you know, because they are closer up. But to be honest, if someone's spending time killing them, then they're not killing the other things that are standing on objectives, because these guys aren't standing on objectives because they can't deploy on an objective. And so you can walk them onto an objective, you can deploy next to it and walk them onto one. But generally, you're wanting to be popping those shots off. That's what you're wanting to do, not wandering around. So yeah, they are pricey, aren't they? But they do something really good. And mine have their proper full biker helmets on as well, so they look cool. So, you know, not walking your ass full. So Rangers, we like Rangers, but like you say, I think Claudio's right. I think they are a bit tricky to use, and Ian loves to load out weapons options. You just start to crank up the price of them as well. Then, and, you know, you get to 20 odd points. I mean, that's 3 Marines.
Yeah,
and you know, they've got to do something, haven't they? If you 1 dies first round without doing anything, that's going to sting a bit, isn't it?
They cost exactly the same points and victory points wise as an enforcer, but shoot worse and survive worse, forgetting that aerial deployment and the weapon options. So keep that in mind. That's all I say. They can be really good, but they are a scalpel, and
you can't really compare between factions though, because they do
no.
things,
But you have to keep it in mind what they can do for the points.
Yeah, but he's half as much as an aberration and doesn't do anything that an aberration does. So we've got 2 final specialist options. We'll just do this quickly. So we've got a marine specialist and a corporation engineer. So they're both very similar. 565. Well, they're both basically Marines. The engineer only gets a hacker as an option, which is obviously scenario specific. Really important for some scenarios, but if you're not playing those scenarios, not that important. The marine specialist, well, he's all about the weapon options, isn't he? So he's your guy. You can take the flamer, the grenade launcher, the holocyte rifle, the sniper. So pretty versatile, really. You know.
Well, the specialist is an interesting counterpoint to the ranger because he's got even more weapon options, but as a base model, he's half the cost. So if you really want to get in on all those tasty weapon choices, he's your man. Whereas the ranger is really investing heavily in the aerial deployment and the armor.
I mean, I must say, I tend to not really take the marine specialist because I just come down to that maths again. It's like, how many points is it for the fancy weapon? And he can die just as easily. Go back to Claudio, so he dies just as easily as anybody else. I might as well just have another marine rather than have 1 grenade launcher. I could have 2 marines for that price. I can have half a marine for that price. I mean, it comes down to that sort of maths for me typically. But I think having those options there is really good because it allows you that versatility in the GCPS list that some other factions don't have.
I think we're again, the best weapon option, I think, is the grenade launcher.
Yeah, particularly as it synergizes with the splats.
Yeah, you have Comlink and the splats, which work fine. And as you said, you don't have to expose yourself. You die as easily as any other, so you get shot with a grenade launcher, just sit back there and it's good.
We should say, actually, for the comlink, because you mentioned it a million times, it's an item, 4 points rare. So it's not expensive. It's rare, so that's a bit of a pain.
And not as common as he makes out.
Not as common as he makes out. I guess the issue with the comlink would be that who would you put it on? We talked about putting it on rangers. But of course, if it's an item, so if you're putting it on them, then he's not having that ammo either. So he's not having that other cheap way of getting that alpha strike. So he has to do a different thing that if it's a ranger, you put it on, which would be a sensible thing because he's got the height and he has to see it himself. But that comlink does work really well. And then the more models you've got with grenade launchers, which are 8 points actually, so basically it's not a grenade launcher, it's a marine, okay, in my maths of working it out. So if you're going to take the comlink, you want a mortar and 1 or 2 marines probably. Yeah.
Sure. And I think that there you
probably,
because for one grenade launcher or one mortar you won't use it. But if like 2, it's still the same cube, and if you hit once and everyone is scattered around, it won't help for the second shot. So keep that in mind too. It's not that good, but it can really help if you want to be more defensive with your specialists. Or well, in the end, you can also go flamethrower on a marine for 4 points, and you have 12 points. Talking of area control and board control, because they lack the melee options. Go in there, flame something, let it burn, so they lose activations, get the objectives, get some control back if the enemy is swarming you. Deny them stacking on cubes for buddy bonuses, and yeah, for good shooting positions. But it's a throwaway unit, but I think for 14 points, it's a really good throwaway unit as a specialist, because you have enough troops to fight.
Yeah, so I think the options are there, aren't they? So the final model in the GCPS list is a small list, so it's not nowhere near as many choices as say the Vehement. So we're not going to take 2 hours, thankfully. There are the living legends, but we won't go into those. But the vehicle option is Corporation Strider, so a basic Strider. So 30 points, 3 victory points, naked. Size 4, armor 3, moves 1, 2, shoots 5, fights 5, survives 5, beast, construct, solid. They're not taking any items, can't be pinned, can't be moved, and has 2 hard points, which allows it the options of either having a Polaris cannon, a chainsaw and assault flamer, a heavy burst laser, or the Ajax build as well. And of course, in escalation, it also got the options of having shoulder rockets or smoke launchers. So you can load these out quite a lot. But it's a Strider. I mean, it's a basic Strider, really. Doesn't shoot as well as the Enforcer one, which is why it's a little bit cheaper. But it's the same as the Maison one. Doesn't fight quite as well as the Plague one, but straight 5s across the board. So what do we reckon about the Strider?
I think, to be honest, every weapon loadout you take can fill a role or a niche in the army which you need. The high AP Polaris cannon is awesome because, as we spoke earlier, the laser cannon on the weapon team is the only really high AP weapon. You have the thermal rifles for 2 AP, but you have to get close, so it's a bit tricky. That's a really good counter to anything with armor. Then you can have a melee option, which isn't that bad to counter, because you can fight with Frenzy and a 5-up fight and size 4. You can counter something which is coming your way to save your gun line. The Ajax is good in everything because that frag hits on 4, so you don't need the 5-up shoot. And you can fight in melee, and it's against the whole cube. You can get an extra armor if you really want to. And the heavy burst laser, weight of fire 2, and suppression get them away. Kill them because you can reroll 2 of your 5 up dice, and suppression is always good to get that board control, to slow them down. So I think everything is good. It's not a bad option there.
What about you, Ian? What do you think? You used to take a Strider in your Enforcers back in the day, didn't you?
Yeah, that's because they're really good at shooting. I think the shooter 5 on this is your most important consideration with what weapon you're spending. So I think probably the sweet spot is the heavy burst laser, because that weight of fire 2 really gives you the opportunity to overcome a mediocre shoot stat. And
the suppression alone is still doing one of the things you want it to do, even if you don't get the hits you want. Yeah, I mean, that's the way I run them. If I run in 1, which is what I would normally do, I'll take the heavy burst laser option, because it's another point of pinning, and you can get height because they can climb, and that weight of fire 2, you'd hope that you're wounding something at least. I don't take the Ajax because I've never built one. And also, more importantly, that's 50 points. And so, in this army, I'm always trying to get as many bodies on the table as possible, really. So anything that it comes down to, how much is that going to cost? I could, that's 3 Marines or 2.5 Marines there, it's that sort of thing. The chainsaw and assault flame are a similar thing. When you add those 2 weapons together, it's actually quite pricey. It's 44 points then. For a mediocre fight. It's not like a plague one, is it, where he fights on a 4?
You just risk not hitting very hard.
It's not that good, but it's your only thing you have. And I think in that, because you told me earlier, we can't really compare between factions.
No, but he doesn't do what I want him to do in this faction.
Not sure, but for this faction, it's the only really way where you can counter attack something. It's pricey, and I think if you go for the Flamer, Chainsaw, or the Ajax, which I really like, then you have to build your army around it.
I think for 50 points, you have to build your army around it. For an Ajax, definitely, wherever army it's in. I'm not against the Ajax, it's just I haven't built one, actually. So that's probably one of the reasons I've never thought of taking it.
That frag is so good.
Because, like you're saying, as a different way of imposing threat on your opponent in a way that the rest of your army just can't do. It could be very useful in that respect, and it's more survivable than any other Strider configuration as well.
Yeah, and the frag free is great. It's just brilliant. Frag's always great.
It's because the biggest problem with, if you're taking a Polaris, you're paying many points for just one shot on one single unit, and if the enemy doesn't really have a high armor unit, it's pretty wasted.
Yeah.
So with the Ajax, you have frag, which affects the whole cube. So possibly you can just walk into an objective cube, stand there with your shield. You're solid. You can't get moved away. You can fight with AP2 and maybe bigger, and you can just frag away whole cubes of enemies, even the other objective, which may
be. So it's great in something like Occupy, isn't it?
Yeah, it's really expensive, but it can get more kills or more damage and more utility than maybe the burst laser while still pinning. So.
Yeah, I mean, I've certainly had plenty of whiffing attacks with a burst laser, heavy burst laser. When you're just like, oh, for goodness sake. I mean, I think interestingly, the Polaris cannon, I don't think I would ever really take it, but ironically, it has got better. So when Striders used to have a 4+ survive, originally, it was absolutely terrible on a GCPS Strider because your base dice roll is worse than your opponent. Then they're allowed to climb, which made it better. And then everyone survived, all Striders survived, changed from 4 to 5. And so he's actually got parity for once. But it's still just too hard to get. I mean, and let's face it, you're going to be shooting a Strider as well. So you're not going to get. Are you going to get 5 wounds? No, because you're just not rolling that many.
You're going to struggle to get a good shot against.
Yeah, you'll do a wound maybe.
First laser gives you half a chance with those rerolls, whereas the frag 3 is for against different opponents. But
yeah, I mean, and the burst laser, the burst laser is taking out something, but not taking out something with armor, because you're shooting against a peacekeeper. He'll probably survive that because he survives better, and your weight of fire 2 will help, but his armor is going to keep him in it because there's no AP on it. So it's a balance, isn't it? It's like, what do you do? I think they struggle a little bit with GCPS in general to deal with things that enforcers or forge farmers would be their worst combo, actually, because they've got armor and they survive well. Whereas you can deal with one or the other. So I can deal with people who got armor and don't survive great, or I can deal with marauders who survive okay but don't have much armor. But that combination of the two is like you're just not rolling enough successes. That's
not enough laser rifles in the world, is there?
No. But that's where you're pinning with your indirects and your mortars becomes really useful then, because he's still falling over, isn't he? This enforcer or forge fire. He still has to stand up, and then he's not walking forwards this turn. He might shoot you back, but he's not getting those objectives, because going back to the Veerman, you've got bodies, so you're trying to score the objectives, aren't you? You're not necessarily trying to kill your opponent off the table with GCPS. So cool. I mean, it's a smaller faction, so we did go through everything. What's your sort of take-home messages then about GCPS? What do you think?
I think I'll just say one other item maybe it's worth mentioning. It's a bit pricey, but stop it.
No, we've done it already.
The trip mines. Because
Claymores.
Trip mines you can buy them for 6 points. They are rare, but I think the biggest issue GCPS have, they can't really get out of the deployment zone or really onto the objectives, because they need the height for the many bodies to shoot properly, and they don't have really really good melee options. And trip mines can save them. You can throw like a grenade, a mine there, which will then trigger if an enemy runs in there. You can trigger it whenever you want, so you can't run a zombie in there and it has to trigger. So you can wait for a juicy target, and it can help to build some corridors where you.
They're tricky though, aren't they? We talked about this in the Veermin one. It's that you've only got 5 rounds. Things move quite quick. Setting up these things actually takes quite a lot of. Yeah,
but I've played Saturday, so 2 days ago. I've played against a Vermin Trapper who, in turn 2, had 3 traps on 3 doors, which denied me a 4-point objective because I couldn't get there, because your activation ends once the mine triggers. So
what were you playing, Rebs?
No, I was playing Mason Labs.
Just send another tech in.
But it doesn't have to trigger. So you, as the owner of the mine, can trigger it manually, and it doesn't auto trigger. And that's something really good. It's expensive for 6 points, but it can help you with that board control thing where you struggle. Once your enemy is there, you usually lose because you don't have any counter. So I think that's one point. And another big point is you don't have so many that much entries like the Vermin, but you have loads of weapons, and those really do make the difference. I think get the right weapon for your tactic, for the right model, in the right position, and you're doing much better than many other armies who have some specialists with built-in weapons there.
Right, you in? What do you think?
I think keep it cheap and cheerful. Lots of bodies, lots of laser rifles, because the more dice you throw, the better chance you've got of being a jammy so-and-so and getting crap load of 8s. And that's what you're going to be relying on. An average dice roll isn't going to do anything, but the more dice you throw, the better chance of getting something above average. That's what you're really betting on. Having a couple of special weapons in there, weapon teams or maybe a strider, just to add a bit of extra punch. But I think bodies with rifles is priority. Yeah,
well, that's exactly how I play it. Well, you've played against me a few times, haven't you? I concentrate on taking out the things I can take out. I ignore the strider. I ignore the, well, I don't ignore the Teraton, but I pin the Teraton. I might ignore the Ripper Rainmaker because it's just too hard to shift. But I'll kill every Maul Beast and I'll kill every Commando and I'll score the objectives because that's what it is. And with so many bodies, I mean, I'm probably putting down 12 models at least, I would think, probably possibly even more. There's more options to get around, to get those clear shots, to get that height when someone hasn't expected it. You know, they've moved because they need to move somewhere, and you've like, aha, now I've got an option of getting the visuals on him. So yeah, I think they're an interesting one. They're not easy. They're certainly not playing on easy mode. They are, I wouldn't say they're necessarily the hardest faction or any stretch of it, but the synergies and there are throwaway models, but you can't keep throwing them away because there's no auto include models either, are they? You know, everyone has to graft. There's no relying on, oh, if that goes wrong, well, I've still got this guy because he's just like unstoppable. There isn't anyone like that. So if you start to lose 3 or 4 models and don't get any comeback for it, then you know you're done for really. So, but they're an interesting one to run. Definitely, plenty of nice options, and it's always nice to, as the puny humans, to get one over on the filthy aliens out there in the world, particularly all those Z's, you know.
I think, Andy, you talked about getting the objectives, and that's a really important thing. Don't be too hesitant, because usually a few players I played against with GCPS tend to stick back because you don't want to get into the fray, but you just have it, and that's on. You lose if you don't, because those objective points are juicy to get, and at some point you won't kill enough. So be ballsy, try it. Maybe you have to find the right balance. That's maybe the hardest point, but they can be really good and they can overwhelm you with those 5 up shoots are really good against many armies. So
good, brilliant, fantastic. So thanks very much, guys, for going through the GCPS with me. So thanks very much, everyone, for checking this one out. Please like, comment, and subscribe. Check out the Way to Fire Facebook page. And if you want to buy any nice shiny toys, then please check out our Goblin Gaming affiliate in the show notes below, and we'll get a little bit of juicy money as well. Actually, tiny amount of money.
Very, almost nuts.
But anyway, thanks very much for watching, guys.
Thank
take
you.
care. Bye all.
Bye.